This morning's reading is from Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 18. The first part is the Magi visit the Messiah. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. Second part, the escape to Egypt. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up," he said, "take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. "A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more." This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God. Will you pray with me? Holy and gracious God, as we continue to worship you this morning, we ask that you would use this time to light the dark corners of our minds, to warm the cold places in our hearts, and to heal the brokenness in our lives. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. In February of 2022, Russian forces advanced into Ukraine. Millions of civilians fled their homes with little warning. Families packed what they could carry. Parents wrapped children in winter coats, standing at hours for border crossing. Trains filled beyond capacity, cars ran out of fuel, and some people walked for days. For many, safety at that time came in the form of train stations and school gymnasiums and church basements, even strangers' spare bedrooms. But these places, they were not home. They were not permanent. They were often crowded, unfamiliar, and uncertain, but they were refuge. They were a temporary shelter from very real and imminent harm, and it was a necessity for survival. But when the bombing paused, or when a border was crossed, those folks quickly realized that refuge alone was not enough. Safety from immediate danger does not mean that life has returned to normal. Families needed medical care, legal help, work, schooling for children, a sense of dignity. They needed more than just an initial escape. Losing your home, your neighborhood, all things familiar, it's not just disorienting, it's traumatic. Refuge saves lives, but it doesn't heal everything, does it? The story this morning from the gospel passage is a story of the Holy Family fleeing from danger, seeking safety, and discovering how fragile life can be. This is the gospel story of King's Day. And it's not often what we talk about on this day. In fact, we are still a little bit hungover, aren't we, from Christmas carols and feasts and parties and all the things, right? The presents, all that good stuff. And just as we ease all the way in to the beauty and the joy and the peace and the calm of the Christmas spirit that we sing about in Silent Night, which wasn't really a silent night, right? We're jolted a little bit by this story, aren't we? This is a scary story. Yes, there is the worshiping and the frankincense and the myrrh, and all of that joy is real. But at the same time, Matthew does not let us forget this portion that he talks about where Rachel is weeping for her children. And she's weeping so hard that she cannot be comforted. Herod, this horrible ruler of the time, gets pretty insecure, gets pretty freaked out because his power and his authority are being threatened. And all of a sudden, people are hurting, right? All of a sudden, he causes this chaos in the area that is causing so much pain and suffering everywhere. And who is suffering? The most vulnerable. Infants. All children under 2. And their parents. And their families. You know, we can often miss at Christmas time, especially on King's Day, which is a really fun and joyous day, especially when we're getting into that Mardi Gras spirit. I got no problem with that, right? But we can kind of miss this major part of the story where the gospel writer tries to remind us that while the joy and the love and the peace and the light of Christmas is real and it is good and it is here, that violence and evil still does exist in the world while Jesus is in it, right? And while it is powerful and awful and it is causing destruction and death and people are crying and Jesus himself is fleeing, as much evil and violence as that is, it did not disrupt God's plan either. God made sure that his plan continued, but he also wept and was heartbroken for all of the people who were suffering in the midst of it. Here in South Louisiana, we might not have had to flee under such awful circumstances, but I think most of us in the room know what it feels like to suddenly need to pack your things and get out of town, like quite quickly. I asked the first service, which was a much smaller group, if anyone in the room had never had to evacuate, and not one person raised their hand. Anybody in this room? Has anyone in this room never had to evacuate? Get out of here, Miss Marsha. So we all kind of know, right? We know this feeling. And did we love the places that we found refuge? In the moment, I see some people like, no, we did not. We did not at all, right? In the moment, it's good, isn't it? In the moment, it's necessary. In the moment, it's a relief, right? When we are in danger, when we are struggling, when we are in need of a rescue in that moment, or we are facing real danger, that refuge is awesome, isn't it? That refuge is helpful. Does anybody want to stay there forever? No. But I want to challenge us this morning a little bit because I think sometimes we get so enamored with the beauty of the gospel message of Jesus coming that we forget the rest. And oftentimes we get so wrapped up in our own lives that we tend to only go to Jesus when we need refuge and not for the long haul, right? Not for the long... See, refuge is a short-term solution, isn't it? It's a short-term, but it's a necessary solution. But it's very different than sanctuary. Wouldn't you say? Sanctuary is more of a long-term state of peace, right? Do y'all remember in Advent, if you journeyed with us in Advent, we talked throughout Advent about making room for Jesus. Making room for Jesus to be born in our lives again, right? And my question for you is, are you thinking about having enough room for him in 2026 for refuge or for sanctuary? Are you interested in just the rescue part or going the rest of the way? It's taken me quite a while in my own faith journey to finally say, you know what, Jesus, I'm interested in more than the rescue part. I'm interested in being along this journey with you for more than just you to rescue me when I'm really in pain or when I'm really uncomfortable. And God, I want you to help me. I want you to help all of us to notice that when you provide for us this shelter, that's not the sign to stop. That's not the final resting place, right? Christ wasn't born just to rescue. He was born to save, to restore, to make new. And the reality is, when we ourselves go the distance and we move from people that are just seeking refuge to people who are seeking and creating sanctuary, we actually allow others to find more than just a rescue, more than just a temporary fix, but a long-term solution. You know, when we evacuated for Ida, we evacuated to my mom's house. She lives in a very fancy neighborhood. And I said at the earlier service, it's the neighborhood of glass houses. You know, like this is the perfect little neighborhood where nothing bad ever happens and everybody's houses are perfect. And even if you all lose power, they all have gas generators until the gas isn't enough for the whole neighborhood. That was a whole fun experience as well, right? But so they had everything they needed. So we were like, we're going there. My mom's house was brand new. Like, it's definitely going to hold up against this storm. And it wasn't long before we were leaving my mom's house looking for shelter because she didn't have power. And we ended up finding shelter in a home. I can't even tell you whose home this was right now. I stayed there for probably 5 days. There were probably 5 or 6 other families all coming and going from this house, right? And I have to say, I had a bedroom to myself. Jason could sleep in the same bed with me. There was air conditioning, there was hot showers, and there was food. That was like the Ritz at the time, right? That was amazing at the time. But I looked over to Jason on like night 2, and I said, I feel so spoiled and privileged for saying this, but for the first time in my life, I understand why someone without the basic needs of everyday life has such a hard time just getting their act together, right? Because when you have to use all of your waking energy to figure out how you're going to have power to cook your food later, right? Or to take a shower, you don't really have a whole lot of brain space for anything else, do you? See, I think too often we are okay just surviving. Even our medical system does this to us. Anybody have a doctor who's trying to keep you at optimal health? I would like the name, please. I need a doctor that can help me do that. What are most of our doctors doing these days? Temporary fixes, keeping us from dying, If you're not dying, they're sending you home from the hospital, right? If you're not real sick, they might not even run a test, right? And so here's the thing. Did Jesus come into the world? Was he born in a manger and died on a cross so that we could just barely make it? 6, 7. That didn't come from me. Didn't come from me. No, the scriptures tell us that Christ came that we might have life and life abundantly. That is why Christ was born into the world. Not just so that we would be rescued, but so that we would be saved, restored, redeemed, so that we might actually be his hands and feet to rescue others so that they could also experience that resurrection in their own life. Matthew 2, 1-8 is often known as the postscript story, and this idea of refugees might not sit super well with us, but I don't want us to miss the importance of what the Magi are doing in this passage. See, the Magi, they are just normal people like me and you guys. They were just doing their jobs. They're astrologers, going to work every day, whatever that looked like in ancient times, right? Checking into the office, punching the time clock, looking at the stars, making some notes, right? And it was in that mundane, very ordinary work that they were doing that had nothing to do with the God of Israel that God met them, that God invited them. And they trusted and they obeyed and they listened and they acted. And I just wonder, do you think any of them had a clue the impact that their actions would have on the rest of the world? You know, sure, maybe they left that day after offering the frankincense and the gold and the myrrh, and they thought, oh, wow, we saved that child's life. We saved that child's life. They know now, right? To go a different way, that Herod is coming, and we've moved this way, and all of these things are happening. Maybe we've done this good thing, but they couldn't possibly know. They couldn't possibly know that what they would do would be talked about today in this worship service, right? That their actions would have such lasting impacts on all of the world for all of time. See, Egypt becomes Jesus' place of refuge, a temporary shelter from imminent harm. Where are we right now in our lives with Jesus? Where are we right now in our faith life, in our discipleship? How much of our faith and practice is about us, just us? And how much of it considers the greater purpose that God has for each of us? We don't have to look far in the world to see a deep need, not just for refuge, but for sanctuary, for lots of folks. I think this passage particularly, some of you might have already been on the edge of your seats. I started out talking about Ukraine and Russia. We're talking about Jesus as a refugee. I might be going off completely, right, into politics. That's not what this is about. It's not what this is about. But I am going to talk about something a little political that has been close to my heart, particularly in this season. I have been blessed and inspired to witness some people in this room who have gone out of their way to help folks who are scared, who are hiding in their homes, who are struggling to get to work, who are afraid to go to the grocery store. I know that there are people of this church who have made sure that children have Christmas presents and families have food on the table. But it hit home for me this week. Many of y'all know that Jason and I have been sick. I'm still struggling a little bit. But when Jason got sick, he had to call into work, and we had a big conversation about whether he would call into work because Jason brings 2 women to work who are afraid to go to work, brings them to and from work. Our neighbors in Kenner, who are Hispanic, who cannot travel right now for fear of their lives. And I was thinking about this passage, and I just thought, we probably know the impact that we make a little, right? I know that it's a really good thing that Jason does that. I know that it's helpful. But do I really know what it means to those mothers, to those families, probably to even their neighborhood, that there is a sign of hope in their neighborhood? And I wonder for us as a church family, we might not all be doing that work, and that's okay. But as a church family, as the people of Jesus at St. Charles United Methodist Church, are we taking seriously the impacts that our actions have on others? Are we taking seriously how badly the world around us needs light and love and rescue and salvation? And here's the thing, friends, here's the thing. It is wonderful to offer help. One of the things that we are great at is offering help. Offering help in times of crisis, in times of need. But if there's anything God has revealed to me in this season, it is that He did not create us for emergency. He did not create us for crisis. He is not inviting us to be a people who stay in this mode of we help when there's an emergency. He created us for wholeness. And if we as Christ's people, as the people of God, can do the work, that our faith is not just about when we need refuge, but our faith is about creating lasting sanctuary in our lives for the presence of God to make a difference in our lives, to bring transformation to our hearts and our minds and our families. That is how change happens. That is how we, the church, help others not just find refuge, but find sanctuary. I am so thankful for the number of people who have been able to walk through the doors at this campus in one way or another and find refuge. Where are we going from there? What are we doing after we've helped in the emergency? What are you doing for yourself when the emergency has passed? Are we waiting for the next emergency to come? Or are we doing the work of creating sanctuary? See, in this ancient story, we hear of this light that guides the Magi. And we hear that the Magi kind of don't really know what they're doing. They're having to listen. They're following a light in the sky. The light leads them to this baby, right? And then after all of that happens, Joseph is then told in a dream, get up and go. Is he given a 5-year plan? Does he or the Magi or Mary, or does anybody know how any of this is going to work out? Like, where's this all going? Do they know? But they listen, and they trust, and they obey, and they act. And it's because of that that we even know the story of Jesus at all. Because some people chose to listen even when they couldn't see the whole picture. What does it look like for you, friends, to cultivate God's leading in your regular, everyday life? So that where we are and where we do life together, not just as individuals, but as a community, a Christ-centered community, that we bring wholeness and holiness to the places around us, to the people around us. I think it starts by being able to acknowledge and look at pain without looking away. That's hard to do. I will say some Some of my, what do we call this? Neurospicy? That's a good word for it, right? Some of my neurospicy or neurodivergent friends understand like how it can be really uncomfortable to maintain eye contact with somebody, right? It can be really uncomfortable to stare in to suffering and to not pull away. It can be really uncomfortable, friends, to look at the headlines and stay with Jesus in the headline and not fall into your political party. I'm sorry if I'm stepping on toes there. That is not what this is about. But what is happening in the world needs Christ. It needs peace, and it needs love, and it needs healing, and it needs restoration. And we are the ones that have been asked to do it, that are invited to do it. What does it look like for you right now to allow Christ himself to guide you more fully? Perhaps you have been brought here this morning to remember a time in your own life where you were made whole. Can you think of a time? A time where you faced heartbreak or brokenness or challenge or suffering, but that time is behind you now? You have a testimony. You are a witness to God's goodness and to God's healing. Perhaps you are here today because you yourself are struggling, because you are suffering in some way, you are in pain in some way, and you are here this morning looking for rescue from Jesus. That's available, but it's not the end point. What does it mean for you in 2026 to be like the Magi, to trust and to listen and to obey and to act, even when God doesn't reveal the whole path all at once? For generations, the church has remembered today, Epiphany, as a season of light. Light that doesn't erase darkness, but light that reveals the way through the darkness. You know, Jesus has been born. The Prince of Peace has come into the world. His love and his joy is real, and it does not erase the violence and the evil that is happening around us. It gives us the power and the strength to light our way through it and bring others along with us. As you come forward this morning, you're going to get to pick a star word. There's star words over there on the baptismal, and there's star words right here on the pulpit. And again, I want to remind you, this is not a box to be checked. Not. This is an invitation for you. And it's an invitation for you to be made whole. And it's possible that you're going to pick up a word that you hate. It is. It happened last year. I'm looking at him right now. It's possible at the early service somebody picked up a word that was Welsh. She had no idea what that word was. We had to look it up on Google. It's possible that you're going to pick up a word that comforts you. Whatever it is, this isn't a resolution that you're making for yourself. This isn't some goal or vision board or anything else. This is simply an invitation from God for you to being made whole, to taking all it is that you have been through in this life and not letting it go to waste, and instead letting it make you complete so that you might help others experience that same wholeness and holiness through Jesus Christ. As we come to the table this morning, and I think about our church's star word, do y'all remember it? Good try. You got it? You want to put it up there? Jason's not even paying attention. Woo, caught you. teleos. Can you put it up there? There it is. Let's say it. Teleos. I hope that as you come to this table this morning, you realize that's what this table is about. That this is a table, a place where Jesus seeks to make us whole. And just like this isn't the end of our journey, it's not the end of your journey either. You get to take this bread and this cup and you go out into the world, right? May we be that people. May we be made whole together.